Welcome to CGTN at a Table. We're having 3 reporters joining us, and please follow us on live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Weibo, and CGTN app. Here we have Jane Kiyo from CGTN Africa, coming all the way from Nairobi. And we also have Yao Chin, reporting here in China for several months, or
5 months.
5 months
now.
5 months, and you come from Britain. All the way.
Or just down the road, depends on how you look at it.
I see. So today we're going to talk about the 2 sessions, and we'll see how the 2 foreign reporters, and including me, myself, as a Chinese reporter, covering this most important political event happening in China every year. And we have Jane Kiyo and Yao Chin covering the 2 sessions for the very first time in your life, right? How do you feel about it for the first time covering this political season?
Well, it was pretty interesting. Maybe I kind of expected it because I've been a journalist for a while. I've been with CCTV now, or CGTN now, for about 6 years. So I basically know what goes on during the 2 sessions. That is from being acquainted with the news reports whenever we send news teams here. I'm back in Nairobi either doing the scripts, reading about it even as a journalist, but it was actually my first time to get that first-hand experience.
Would you tell us some behind-the-scenes stuff that were not being said on TV?
Well, first of all, that we had to wake up early. Then we had to leave the hotel by 5.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, which is not unusual. I mean, even in Africa, when we are covering elections, I mean, there are those early mornings. You have to be maybe in a polling station by 4 o'clock, 5:30. But that time you think you're the first person to go there. So by the time you're leaving the hotel, you're asking your producer, my producer is Lan, and you're thinking, I hope we are really the first people to get there. And by the time we get to the Great Hall of the People, the queue of journals, the journalists, was from here. You know, as far as the eye can see. I think I kind of got an idea how big this event is by the number of journalists that were covering the event. Because
why do you think they are so, ready to queue there just to get in?
I think this is China. We've got to accept that this is the world's 2nd biggest economy. There's a lot of attention on China at the moment. You can tell that China's role on the global arena is really evolving, and it's increasingly becoming very present wherever you go. So there's a lot of attention in whatever China is doing. And that's why, for starters, even you, I'm sure you can tell us, you've been covering this process for a while now, maybe since you began your career, but you can tell it's changing with time. It's perhaps becoming more open. We're seeing a lot of international attention. We are seeing also the inclusion perhaps of even foreign observers, not even journalists, to just come to be part of the process for the very first time. And I got a chance to speak to some of them.
You talked to many foreign diplomats here,
I did.
Coming to the 2 sessions to have a look, right?
Yes, I did.
Why do they have to come? I think they also got up quite early. Why do you think they're so interested in this political event in China?
Well, they all mentioned different things. Some were saying from Africa, they were like, basically, we're here, it's a learning process. We're excited about, the systems that are working in what is the world's biggest population. The institutions are working. But the bottom line is, most of them will tell you we're just here because we know this is the time that China and the leaders will give an outline of the country's plans over the next 1 year. So they're using this as a window or a glimpse to kind of get to know what the country is planning, where it's going. And of course, for everybody, China's economy is very important. Most of them were mentioning we're here to know the policy on economy. Well, the growth target, now it's been set at 6.5%.
Approximately?
Approximately. Apparently
Meaning
that
it's
makes
tolerable if the government failed to meet it.
Apparently, and because right now you can tell.
Quality of growth.
Exactly. So, so that is all important to these people. And I think one of the most sticking points is that they were basically here. They think the NPC provides that opportunity for them to know what the country is thinking, either internally or in terms of foreign policy.
So it's more like a window to have a look at what is happening right at the heart of the Chinese decision-making process, right?
Exactly.
So Yao, yeah.
I think it's also, the window is a lot smaller than it used to be. Previously, you're looking at a 5-year plan and people will accept, well, that's where China's going to be. China moves so rapidly now that constantly around the world, people are tuned in to what is, what's advancing. What is China thinking? What is China doing?
5 years is too long.
5 years
China's
is too long.
fast-changing
1 year
world,
is
right?
too long. So they're paying more attention to the NPC, but they're also just listening in more. They are interested because they know it affects them now. It didn't used to. I mean, and Jane will know, better than me and better than a lot of people how China has made a positive impact on Africa.
Definitely.
But it affects everybody. And everyone now is, I think, much more in tune with that. I was at the Fortune Forum in Guangzhou covering that in December. Again, to get the world's most busy, powerful, rich CEOs all in the same room, all just kind of excited. They were on a it was like going on a school holiday. They'd taken their time out of work where they get paid a huge amount of money just so they can be in China and understand China better and be part of that. So I think that it is much more than it used to be for the international audience.
This is also what I've been feeling, because I've been working as an English language reporter in China for like 6-7 years. And before that, we were always thinking about how we can attract foreign people to watch our channel, right? But I think from last year or the year before last year, it's becoming like whatever we are reporting, it seems that many people are already watching because they're getting more interested in what China is doing. And that's because what China is doing is also deeply affecting the rest of the world. Either it's for good or for bad. There is a lot of impact on China's global impact on China's changing societies, right?
Certainly.
Yes, and actually we were together at the Great Hall of the People when we were covering the opening session of the National People's Congress on Monday. And we were even making selfies together, right? So how do you feel about that opening of the NPC? Because we know that Premier Li Keqiang made a nearly 2-hour-long speech, which is very, very rare for any politician in the rest of the world, right?
And I think that makes the difference for most people, because from where I come from, and perhaps in most places, the most somebody would stand is like 40 minutes, I think, and that's like pushing it so far. But I think for China, it's very different, the way I see it, because you have, they are outlining these issues, and they're not just giving empty promises, and I think that makes the whole difference.
Because there's a lot to be done.
Exactly.
That's why it takes 2 hours. It's not because he's lost his train of thought or he's going around in circles. He's going through everything that needs to be attended to, because this is a massive population. It is what, again, you come from a huge continent. I come from an island nation that's now divorced itself from Europe. So I'm struck by the size of the country, the unity, but also the contrast between different regions and provinces. But the size of the population is immense. So 2 hours, you can be surprised it took that short a time, in 2 hours, to get through everything that he wants to do in the, in the coming year and the year that's past. So, what excited me when the deputies were arriving was I just saw, looking at them, sort of like metaphorically, I saw all the people whose lives they in turn will touch. What is being discussed, what is being passed over the next coming days, it affects lives.
Yes, I think even these days you guys are already traveling across Beijing to gather the thoughts from the deputies, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So-
the people.
And the people as well. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the people, since you mentioned it, because that's also very important. There are like nearly 3,000 NPC deputies already, discussing, deliberating the government work report at the moment, and we're trying to talk to some of them. But I know that even 1 or 2 months before the 2 sessions even started, you guys are already in the field in China, covering a lot of stories happening here. Let's start from Jane first.
The posh stuff, because that's what I got.
The posh stuff.
Actually, we covered the story together.
We
On the
did.
fast-speed bullet train, right?
Yes, food delivery,
Yes.
and which is pretty new in China. But you can tell there's a lot of excitement about it, given the number of orders that are being made on the high-speed railway,
Yeah.
or rather high-speed train.
Yeah, just tell people what was happening at the time, because what is the story we were covering?
Well, the story was about, first of all, the high-speed train and this new food delivery service that's pretty new in China, where you get to order food 1 to 2 hours before you board the train, and you can order anything from the cities that you guys are passing through, or the passengers are passing through. So that day we got to order from Nanjing, and I think the most popular meal there is Nanjing duck. But for me, it was an excitement on two fronts, because I've never been on a high-speed train. So it was really exciting, and also it gets to be the fastest train in the world.
Moving at
350 kilometers per hour. So that was exciting for me, because and even the contrast with where I was coming from is because right now what we consider our best train in Kenya, which was launched last year, it was the SGR, the Standard Gauge Railway, which is probably a different system from the bullet train. But the fact that it's reducing travel from Mombasa to Nairobi. Mombasa is Kenya's second biggest city, and it's about 480 kilometers from Nairobi. Previously, you travel by bus, that's about 10 hours, an entire day. But right now with the SGR, the travel has been reduced to about 4.5 hours, which is what you get from Shanghai to Beijing, Beijing to Shanghai. But from Shanghai to Beijing, Beijing to Shanghai is about almost 1,400 kilometers. So it simply tells you the rate of technology here. And I think that for me was exciting. And, telling all my relatives and my family and my friends, people who care to listen about this technology in China.
When we were covering the stories together, actually, she's the one who's graceful, just sitting here, relaxed on the train, making orders, and I was the one who was really exhausted.
Behind the scenes.
Because we were doing it separately, and then we put it in the same story. She was sitting on the train making the order, and I was following the whole process of how the food was made in the kitchen and then being sent all the way to the train. And then she
cool
just
is
made
that?
it 1 hour before the food should arrive. So for the whole
And
hour,
you cover the food being
I
made.
covered the food
How
being
cool
made
is
and being
that?
delivered.
I hope you gave him a tip when the food arrived as well, because
Well-
he worked very hard
Now that you mentioned it, did I?
No.
for it. You didn't even share your food.
Well,
Gave
I
you a
did
lesson.
share the
And
Nanjing
I brought you to
duck.
some great places in
And
Shanghai to have
he
some
not only
Shanghai
brought
local
me
cuisine.
the duck, he actually, and I was telling him, my experience in Shanghai probably was the best, and he made it. I'm not even just saying it. He took us to the best restaurant, the Shanghai experience, very nice food.
Not a very big one, but it's very authentic one.
Exactly, I really enjoyed it. I
And
mean,
one thing that it really made me impressed on your comment about Shanghai is that you said every building in Shanghai is a skyscraper. Right?
coming from Africa, yeah, everything just seemed so tall, and I'm thinking, goodness, when was this built and everything? And it's really a beautiful city, and it really seems to be, out there. I mean, Shanghai is so different. Life seems to be very fast. It was a weekend, but you can tell everything is moving so fast, at least from
Yeah.
where I come from.
Yeah, so that's how we are covering, using the fastest delivery system to chase after the fastest train in the world, which has really made me exhausted. So actually, I know that we covered some glamorous part of China, but you are covering some working class and grassroots part of China, right? Tell people more about the story that impressed you the most.
But in a way, I think, don't get me wrong, I'm just as in awe of WeChat. I finally worked out how to use Didi the other day. In fact, I also knew how to use Didi, but ultimately the drivers call you in Mandarin, then I get stuck. But I'm partly here because I do want to go out into China to meet the public of China. I think that in every country in the world, the capitals and the big cities are always guilty of thinking that the world revolves around them. Actually, the country is a population, entirely across the whole country, and it's the same thing goes with China. So that's a privilege. It is a genuine privilege to be able to go out, get on a plane, and then get in a car and drive for hours and hours to really meet.
And they
people
must be
and
very
make them
different from the Guanghua Road here in Beijing, the CBD of the capital, right?
It's it's real, it's authentic. This is China, and I'm, you know, for them to share their stories and their problems.
So
It's why we go into journalism.
Yeah.
It is that privilege and honour. So I've been doing that. I've been looking at how agricultural reforms and healthcare reforms have helped benefit a lot of the population. At the same time, I've just done, and I'm continuing to do, some reports on the migrant workers here. And when I say migrant, I would explain to our audience that migrant doesn't mean from outside of China. These are workers who have come from elsewhere, mainly to the cities, often doing hard manual work, but still often very skilled work. And they have, they are part of the population, but sometimes, they're not as focused on, because they're neither back in the regions, neither are they sort of like fully integrated with.
That's what we call the so-called hukou policy in China.
Okay.
It's household registration. It's kind of complicated, but to put it simple, it's more like a green card for people in Beijing. For example, if you got a Beijing hukou, it's a green card for you to live in Beijing. Of course, anyone can come and live here, but if you don't have this hukou or the so-called green card, you cannot even send your children to local schools, or don't even have the right to buy an apartment, or you're not enjoying the equal medical service or medical care, which is some people would argue is quite unfair, but it's the way the Chinese government in big cities is trying to control the population, because there's just simply too many people flowing into big cities looking for opportunities. So you've covered their stories, their struggles.
That's right. So to reverse the process, what the government is implementing is rural vitalization, is taking the economies of local communities and raising them up by improving infrastructure. In fact, yesterday again, the Premier talked of more infrastructure development in the rural communities, building 200,000 kilometres of roads, advancing the utilities so that what we take for granted, they can one day too. And that's what excites me.
I think that's one aspect of helping them, but there's also the other aspect of having them integrated into big cities, because anyway, some people don't want to return. They try to chase their ambitions, their aspirations in big cities, looking for better lives. Actually, the stories that we covered and you covered about, the high rises in Shanghai, and also the food delivery to the fast-speed bullet train, actually they are being done by people who are migrant workers, who are the delivery folk that I was following for the whole hour, which really made me exhausted, was only a 19-year-old boy. He graduated from high school, and then he started this job right away, and is having to run the same journey between the train station to the train at least 20 times every day.
Wow.
And it doesn't have any time to have a rest. And also the buildings, I think you covered some stories about migrant workers making the construction work, which is a very back-breaking job, right?
It is. One of the construction workers, he told me he was 47, but he's going to retire in the next 3-4 years. The moment his daughters have graduated, he says, then he has made his sacrifice to the family. He can retire and go home. It is hard work. And that's it. You're right. Some of them will feel they want to stay in the city, but actually the majority have a family that they want to go back to, that they have been separated from economically. And that is not about China. That happens everywhere in the world. I'm fully aware of that.
But not on a massive scale like in China.
Simply because of the numbers. But in one of my in part of my travels, I was talking to, I met a family, a Miao family in Guizhou, in the south of the country. The 12-year-old daughter, she was 10 when her mother came back home. Her mother had been away for about 3 years.
Whoa.
Her mother earned on average 2,500 to 3,000 yuan to bring back she brought home that money a month, sent home, only keeping 500 for herself. 500 to put that into I can't do the dollars conversion. I can do the sterling conversion.
It's nearly $100.
Right, so $100 to live off per month. The sacrifice was so great. She was heartbroken when she went back because the children wouldn't even take to her, wouldn't acknowledge her because they were used to the in-laws looking after them. And when they finally sort of like got back together again, and the daughter in front of me cried and said, "Please don't ever leave me again." This is an economic sacrifice. It happens everywhere. But I find, but one mustn't forget that actually it's migrant workers who have helped build Shanghai, Beijing, and so partly I've been covering their stories because I feel that they are as important to represent as anybody else, as any other part of the
And a part of
community.
the success story.
Yes.
That's why it's always important to have this NPC, to have the representation.
Exactly.
But we're really thinking how much representation they can have. What do you guys think? What does Jane think about this?
Well, I think I'm not so sure does it mean whether they actually feel represented or do they feel a part of the process? Do they need to change that?
I think after a while, because you just started covering these 2 sessions, and I think after a while, after we talk to more deputies, you will see that actually many of them are migrant workers themselves.
Yeah.
It's not a big proportion, but there are some of them working as migrant workers. They're building the constructions, high-rises, skyscrapers in big cities, or sending deliveries to people's homes or to the train. But in this month, they are working as deputies, trying to represent people and trying to make their voices heard. That's how the NPC works.
Amazing. I think it's the more you cover it, I think you probably need enough time to kind of learn. It's somewhat a complex process.
Yes.
Perhaps only the Chinese get to really understand it, and because you'd raise some questions and you need to get to understand how the representation works, whether people really feel 100% represented. Maybe like now you say the deputies are migrant workers. People need to know that because probably what is said out there would be perhaps different compared to the rest of the world. But you see, like now you're saying the deputies are part of the migrant workers, which is important. That means that people at the lower level are actually being represented.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I get the feeling that there seems to be much more of a sense of accountability and representation in the system. That it is we've only just arrived, but you get the impression that for years this has always been the political season, and everyone knows about it, and things slow down. There's a focus on the politics, but I do get the feeling that the population feel more connected with what's going on.
Yeah.
So not only the international community, as we've spoken about, but also the local community. They know that it means more and more. I think again it's because China moves so quickly that and effects and the effects are felt much more rapidly than in other countries. That if they say it this year, by next year, they're already on the road to making it happen.
They're not just making empty promises.
Yeah, that's what's happening in the NPC, because we see that the Premier Li Keqiang has made the 2-hour speech, and actually last time when they were having the CPC National Congress last October, I think you are covering that as well, right? General Secretary Xi Jinping made a 3.5-hour speech, making detailed plans of every single aspect of China. And what really amazed us is not that he's making a detailed plan, but he's determined to get it implemented. If you look back into other government work report 5 or 6 or 10 years ago, I have to say that at least 90% of them all got implemented and achieved.
Which is what really matters, actually. And that is why sometimes even if questions about quote-unquote democracy, which is very relevant, I keep saying, it is relevant depending on where you stand. for most people, if they were asked, as long as institutions are working, as long as I have peace, as long as my children can go to school, I have a roof over my head, as long as we are seeing development, that is what actually matters at the end of the day. And I think that is why the process in China appears to be working fine. The Premier League, President Xi will give these long speeches, and that is why they are so detailed, because they're not empty promises. We are working with a deadline, we are working with targets which have to be met. And I think for the Chinese people, they've learned with that. When you tell us this has to be done by December, it has to be there. And like
actually, there are a lot of deadlines for the Communist Party and also for the Chinese government as well, which is the year 2020. I think you know a lot about it, right? Like by the year 2020, we must get rid of poverty. But now there are still 30 million people struggling under poverty line. And but it's already happening because 5 years ago, when President Xi promised that China will completely get rid of poverty by 2020, it was kind of unimaginable for many people, even in China.
Yeah.
Because at the time, there were like 100 million people struggling under the poverty line. And in just 5 years, they decreased number by 70 million. Now it's only 30 million left.
Wow.
But it doesn't mean 70% of the job done, because the last 30 million are the people, as you said, living in remote mountainous areas where some of them have lost the ability of working because of their diseases or disability. That's the real challenge of China's promise of getting rid of poverty in just 3 years' time. The clock is actually ticking now.
That's right. I mean, there's work to be done.
Yeah.
There's work to be done. So that's the spirit I see. The both sessions taking place. It's about forward motion. For whom? For the people. 1.4 billion population.
Can you imagine?
It's just, 5 months later, I mean, you get on the metro, that's nothing compared with just thinking, 1.4 billion people here.
I know, it is strange.
But I think it gives me a sense of hope for the people that I have met along the way, that they can see that ultimately their lives are getting
better.
Hopefully better. And you're right, it is about reaching out to those people who are disabled, who are not able to get work, who the work is not there. When I was covering the agricultural reforms, I went to a loach farm, so it wasn't a farm, it was a fish farm in Sichuan. To me, the focal point, it might have looked like a byline, but actually the focal point of that whole report was meeting one of the workers who he had this amazing kind of like glow. He was 60 years old. He is 60 years old. He told me, I've only worked for the last 2 years because I have a foot disability. I've been able to build the ponds that hold the fish, and now I help fish them. And you can see the sense of pride in his whole body, not just his eyes, that it's made a difference. That's what it's all about. It's about the individual, but there are a lot of individuals.
It's more like what a very ancient philosopher in China said: give them a fish, you feed them for a day, and teach them to fish, you fish them for a lifetime. That's the way, China is trying to get rid of poverty, by enable them to work in this fast-changing market. And it is competitive, I have to say. Because it's changing too fast. If you can't keep up with the pace, you're being, eliminated from the market.
But then, that's realistic, because if you don't make it competitive, then it will fall over. You need people to become more efficient. So again, all the reforms are based on supply-side changes. They're about making quality goods efficiently, so that it's not about just dangling a carrot and helping people feel better about themselves. It's giving them the power to take their businesses abroad from a small little farm holding in the middle of essentially nowhere. So the place I was at, they're making loach fish sauce that they are marketing to South Korea.
Amazing.
And then with the healthcare reforms, we're talking about Chinese hospitals, some of which are world class and sharing their technology and understanding with Johns Hopkins, with Oxford University, etc.
In Africa, a lot of that, we've seen a lot of that as well.
I mean, I remember clearly when the Ebola outbreak happened, the PLA turned up and solved the, helped solve the problem.
I think Jane has more say on this,
Liberia,
right? Since you're from CGTN Africa.
Certainly, and that's what I was telling him. I mean, we've seen a lot of that. I mean, the health, the Chinese doctors coming into Africa to train our doctors as well, and also to step in times of crisis like the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. And there's a lot of Chinese influence, especially in Africa, in terms of infrastructure. We're seeing the OBOR really having an impact there. And I think these are exciting times for China. And when you talk about, I think he got the best stories now when I listen to him, because I'm a journalist and I'm used to covering conflict. And you get that human touch, which is what moves any journalist. And so for me, when I'm listening to you, I'm already feeling perhaps what you felt when you met these people who are so different. Like you said, in the big cities, we know we're so cosmopolitan and we feel like we don't have any problem. In fact, I mentioned it to you when I was telling you that in Kenya and in most African countries, it is the poor and the rural folk who, even in terms of elections, when there are elections, they are more attached to their vote, if I can say that, because they feel connected. They are so moved. The middle class...
Because this represents hope.
Exactly. The middle class feel like, you know what, I have electricity, I have, my children are going... I have a car, my house, everything is working, so...
Did you turn up and vote? No, I didn't have time.
I didn't, thank you. I was actually telling him as much. I was telling him that's the life in Africa. Like the poor people and the rural folks are the ones who hold everything to heart.
That's actually what the Communist Party or Chinese government continues to say that they represent, because they come from the grassroots several decades ago, and they are now still working, and they say they're still trying to work for the grassroots China. So actually today, I think the discussion is quite interesting. We touch upon these two themes. One is the representation of the grassroots people here in China, because they are the forces who help build the glamorous side of China, the fast development of China. And the other thing is the efficiency that we must recognize in the Chinese system, that first, it changes really fast, and secondly, once the government promises anything, they really get it done, and sometimes, or always, before the deadlines, right?
But that's not to say that this country is complacent. I think I'm also learning that in so many places here, there's recognition, there's room for improvement, there's room to learn. And I think that's also something that I think the outside world sort of like, hasn't really taken hold of. China's looking to learn and grow and in partnerships, and there's no mystery about it. It's about advancing humanity. It's about just making things better. And so you're absolutely right. The efficiency of let's get it done, but China's also interested in how to make things better, how to better in terms of its people, but also better in terms of quality. Gone are the days when it's just about quantity and about churning out made in China. There's a sea change now, and China realizes that. You cannot do the same old nonsense that you've done before if you want to advance, and that's the same everywhere. So along with the efficiency now comes greater effect. But yeah, ultimately there are so many million people who are still in poverty here. The number in poverty here is bigger than a lot of countries' population.
Yes.
So
30 million. That's 10 million of my country's population.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's a very big project.
It is, yeah.
And just one more goal we have to say by the year 2020 is to providing internet access for everyone
Everybody,
here in China.
yeah.
Everybody. Either you are in Beijing or Shanghai, or you are in Xinjiang or Tibet, or some remote areas, remote mountainous places in China, you get internet access by the year 2020. And that means a leveled playing field. That you can
No. It means an advanced playing field, because around the rest of the world, you cannot take for granted you even get a phone signal.
Yes.
You know, on the London Underground, it's only recently where you can get Wi-Fi in certain places. I didn't know what to do with myself when I could make phone calls on the Underground here. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
You get Wi-Fi on the fast-speed bullet train now in China. And also, it levels the playing field in terms of having the same flow of information with people in Xinjiang and people in Beijing, and also embracing e-commerce in places like Tibet, just like people in places like Shanghai. Right?
Because, going back to Fortune Forum, it was about innovation. And that's where China has the upper hand. Why? Because its population are so connected, if I can borrow your phone without advertising, this means a lot. You will see the population in the streets here and everywhere else connected to their mobiles. Why? Because it is their banking, it is of course their social connection.
It is their everything.
It is their everything, from buying their food to getting their car. It is, you know, it is about that connectivity. And so many people who, you know, CEOs were saying, you know, this is the place where we you know, innovation thrives, and it's a test bed, because you get very quick reactions. What works, what doesn't. You know, what is, you know, what, you know, China will either reject it or accept it.
What is
as a
so
population.
amazing, and you've just mentioned about what works, doesn't work, and I remember I was doing this story about the unmanned supermarket, and it was Amazon that actually came
unmanned
fast.
supermarket, yes, that's something really a miracle, right?
It is a miracle,
even for
because
people in China.
It was first flouted by Amazon, I think about 2 years ago in 2016, and actually it was actualized here, where you now have several convenience stores unmanned. They're making it humanless as possible.
So how do you pay the money?
Okay, I was first of all shocked coming from Africa, because in JD.com store, first of all, they use the facial recognition. You don't even need your money. So
And you don't even need your mobile phone, because they recognize your face.
They recognize your face. So what you do, you just walk in and it gets to recognize your face. And because you've already uploaded the app on your phone, so they already know what you look like, and they probably have all your information. And now what happens is that the stores have cameras and scanners all around. So the moment you pick your item and you're walking out, the amount is deducted from your phone. How cool is that?
That's just so impressive. And
I'm not so sure that would work where I come from, but that's so cool.
And if we really think about it, by the year 2020, if everyone has internet, this means that theoretically, this kind of unmanned supermarket can be set up everywhere.
And
in Tibet, or in, you know, in remote Guizhou mountains.
I have to say one thing, though, that also reflects something that is important to me, that Jane touched on, that in Beijing, I have found it so safe that actually, you know, in other countries, if you'd left things where a lot of shops have left things, they'd be gone. But here, people are very law-abiding, so that works well. The unmanned supermarket, because apart from the fact that you're being watched and they've tracked you via your identification, people don't think to just go and take something from the shelf anyway. But it struck me. I saw the same thing in my flat compound. I still don't know what to do with it. I'm looking like a Neanderthal looking at this thing, thinking, there's no one there. I'll wait for someone to turn up the unmanned supermarket to serve me. Then it'll take me another few years, Jane. I'll probably ask you how to use it.
We can try that next time. I've never been to an unmanned supermarket before. I think you are a pioneer already among the three of us.
Clearly,
to
on so
that.
many, but it's really exciting, I think, when you just know what you're up against, and that this is new technology, and it's working pretty well. Here in China, I think we have it at JD.com, Alibaba has tried something as well, and other smaller industry players. So it's pretty cool, I think. I would want to see something like that tried in Africa or where I come from.
As long as there is internet, there is this technology and enough funding, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, and I think China has really gone big also on artificial intelligence. I think they're also making that their goal for the economy. I think in 2020 they've said they are going to invest in a lot of that. But like you mentioned, I think China is the laboratory where everything goes. You know, there's so much cooking, and there's a tech boom. Anything can come out of here. And I actually testify to that, because I was here last year. Last May I was in China. there were no unmanned supermarket, at least I didn't experience, there was no fast train. I mean, the high-speed train. And I come back this year just in March or in February, that's when I came here, and you're like, there's so much has changed. And actually, when I even compare, because it's my third time since I came in 2013, I can see so much change even in terms of the food, in terms of the stores that are coming up. So that really, this is a country that's moving so
one
fast.
thing that is really interesting, let me just summarize it this way. One thing that is really interesting is that China is changing fast, but there are always fear in anywhere in like the rest of the world that if the world or the country is changing too fast, many people would be left behind, right? But here in China, when the government says it's trying to get rid of poverty, to bring the 30 million people's poverty population into zero in just less than 3 years, and also getting everyone connected to the internet and level the playing field for everyone, it seems that it's changing fast and people's lives are improving fast, but no one is being left behind.
Which is a good thing, yeah.
Let's
more people are being brought in rather than being left
Left
behind.
out. And
It's not a swap.
Yes, yes.
But it's about efficiency, it's about competition, because as I said, if you don't instill a sense of being able to look after your own future, it's never going to happen. But instead, you give them the chance and they will run with it.
Yeah.
And if they did that to 70 million, I mean, 30 million, I think they'll manage to uplift their living standards.
Yeah, hopefully they can do it, because I think with the clock clicking now, if I were the president, I would, feel difficulty just to fall asleep. It's just tough work ahead, right?
I always think so. I keep wondering. I don't think I am one of those who want to be president, because I think it's too much work. Can you imagine taking care of 1.4 billion, let alone 40 million where I come from? So it's a lot of work, but I think China is amazing. I mean, not even sugarcoating. I'm always amazed when you go to the airport, it is so busy. You go to the railway, it is so busy, and everybody is on the move. But everything seems to be working so well, and you're thinking, goodness, okay. This is pretty interesting stuff here.
Let's just call it a day, because we had a very interesting discussion just now, and we were talking about people's representation, particularly those from the grassroots, and we are still talking about the struggle of them getting more voices heard in the public and also in the top political event. And also we were talking about the efficiency of how China is developing fast and how it's changing not only people here in the country, but also many, many people in the rest of the world. And thank you very much again, Jane and Yao, coming all the way from different parts of the world.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And you guys have a good night. Bye.